What if you're not losing the truth? What if the structure of mind is simply rebuilding itself around it? You had the recognition. Maybe once, maybe many times. The silence was obvious. The self was absent. Everything felt clean, unheld, undivided. And then later, the old identity returned. The tension returned. The seeking returned. The fear returned. And now the mind says, see, it didn't last. But that's not what happened. A lot of people reach a real recognition, and then they watch themselves fall back into identification, back into reaction, back into defensiveness, back into comparison, back into becoming somebody. And because of that, they assume the recognition was false. It wasn't. The recognition was real. What returned was conditioning. That distinction matters, because if you don't see it clearly, you turn awakening into another performance, another pass or fail test, another spiritual identity. And that is the dream rebuilding itself. Listen carefully. You cannot unsee the truth, but you can re-identify with thought. You can re-enter the old structure. You can start believing the story again. That's what slipping back is. Not truth disappearing, not awareness failing, not grace being revoked. Just the old machinery restarting. Memory restarts, self-image restarts, social identity restarts, psychological time restarts. The system begins rebuilding the familiar center, me. The one with a past, the one with a problem, the one who needs to stabilize this, the one who needs to get back. But pause. Get back to what? If what you are is awareness itself, where exactly would you return from? Here's the deeper reason recognition doesn't seem to stick. Because recognition is immediate, but conditioning is patterned. Recognition happens outside of time. Conditioning was built through repetition, years of defense, years of fear, years of psychological rehearsal, years of being someone. So the mind has momentum, and the body has momentum too. That's why a person can clearly see there is no separate self and still feel jealousy, panic, contraction, shame, social confusion, loneliness. Not because the truth failed, because the organism still carries old instructions. The body may still react to a self that has already been seen through. That is not hypocrisy, that is lag. This is where people get confused. They think recognition should erase all patterns immediately. It doesn't. They think awakening should produce a stable state. It won't. They think if fear appears, then identification must have won. Not necessarily. Fear can appear, sensation can appear, even contraction can appear. The real question is not, what am I feeling? The real question is, what am I taking myself to be in this moment? Because fear as sensation is one thing. Fear as identity is another. A body can tremble, a heart can race, thoughts can fire, and still what you are remains untouched. That's the part the mind keeps missing. If this series is cutting through the fog for you, subscribe. Not for more content, for precision. This is the new human, and we're not here to decorate the self. We are here to expose what remains when the self stops pretending to be central. Now, let's talk about integration, because this word gets used badly. Integration does not mean a self successfully holding on to awakening. There is no self doing the integrating. Integration means the old structure is no longer being obeyed automatically. That's all. It means the recognition begins to permeate behavior, speech, relationship, conflict, work, silence, the body, not as an achievement, as a reordering. You stop arguing for the phantom center. You stop defending images. You stop narrating every sensation as my problem. You stop turning contraction into identity. Integration is not mystical. It is simple, brutal sometimes, ordinary. It looks like less self-reference, less drama, less recovery time after getting hooked. Not perfection, not permanent bliss, just less obedience to illusion. Right now, before the mind turns this into philosophy, notice this. You are here, aware. That much is undeniable. Now notice what is appearing to that awareness. Thoughts, sensation, memory, maybe tension, maybe restlessness, maybe the urge to get back, to some clearer state. Good. Now look closer. What exactly is under threat? Not the story, not the explanation. Directly, what is under threat? Can you find an actual center here? A real self that is being damaged? Or only thought, referring to thought, claiming ownership over sensation? Stay there for a second, not thinking, just noticing. Most people fall back asleep for 3 reasons. First, they mistake recognition for the end of conditioning. So when old patterns return, they panic, and panic becomes re-identification. Second, they turn awakening into memory. Instead of what is here now, they start chasing a previous opening, a previous silence, a previous spaciousness. Now they're not awake, they're nostalgic. Third, they still believe in psychological authority. A thought appears. I'm losing it. I'm back where I started. I'm not integrated. I need to stabilize. And because the thought sounds serious, they bow to it. That is the relapse, not the appearance of thought, the obedience to thought. So, what do you do when the old identity comes back online? Very little. You stop making it personal. You don't announce a fall. You don't build a story. You don't measure distance from some imagined awakened version of yourself. You notice identification is happening. Good. Now something is aware of that. And that awareness, has it slipped? Has it been damaged? Has it become smaller? Has it lost itself? Or is it simply here, watching the weather move? Let the body feel what it feels. Let the nervous system discharge what it needs to discharge. Let thought spend itself, but do not rebuild a me around the turbulence. This is where real maturity begins, not in getting rid of storms, in no longer becoming the storm. Recognition doesn't fail because it fades. It only seems to fade when the mind becomes louder than your willingness to look. The truth is quieter than that. It doesn't shout over conditioning. It doesn't perform certainty. It doesn't demand to be believed. It just remains untouched, unimproved, unthreatened. And over time, if you stop serving the false center, something changes. Not because you mastered awakening, because the machinery of self is no longer being fed the same way. This is what integration really is. Not holding on, not maintaining a state, not becoming spiritually impressive, just seeing again and again that what is real does not come and go. Only identification does. And eventually even the drama of slipping back begins to thin out because no one is left trying to own the light. If this landed, stay with the series because the next step is even sharper. What happens when reaction itself begins to collapse? Not suppression, not numbness, not control. The end of reaction because there is no one left at the center demanding protection. That's episode 5. Until then, notice how quickly the mind turns movement into identity. And then ask quietly, who is the one slipping back?